ousted Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro pleads not guilty to drug charges after appearing in court for the first time since his capture over the weekend.
Professor and political analyst Rick Epps joining us now to break down exactly what we know so far. Rick, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, good morning. Good to see both of you.
For those who may not be familiar, may not know, give us a little history here. Explain how Maduro rose to power and, of course, the controversy surrounding his presidency.
Yeah, well, he rose to power through the ranks. He had been a union leader many years ago, back in the early 2000s, up to about 2010 or so. And then he was an ally of Hugo Chavez, who was a former president. Then he became the foreign minister and then the vice president. And then when Hugo Chavez died in 2013, Hugo Chavez had endorsed Maduro as the next successor to rule in Venezuela. And once he got in power, he consolidated his authority, basically by stacking the loyalists in the courts and in all the electoral bodies, cracking down on opposition, the usual stuff that autocratic rulers do when they take control. And Hugo Chavez wasn't much better, but it was certainly gotten much more problematic with Maduro sitting in the seat.
As we're watching all these different events, Rick, unfolding in the world, the word dictator comes up a lot, and many might not really know what the true meaning of that is. What is a dictator? Why was he considered a dictator?
Yeah, well, partially for what I just said. I mean, one of the things dictators do, first of all, the first thing they do is they centralize power, right? So their goal is to take, democracies rely on power being dispersed across multiple, from federal, state to local levels, right? Well, in dictatorships, they centralize power and they rule by decree, meaning whatever the leader says at a centralized power entity state as being the rule of law, that's what happens. And then they sideline all the opposition so that there is that any pushback gets slapped down very quickly, and they use the courts to basically keep all the opposition in check. They also, control the elections, so anybody who is trying to run against them basically doesn't stand a chance because they're basically all the elections are rigged. And then, strangely enough, regarding Maduro, by 2019, many of the countries in the world, along with many of the organizations like the OAS and the EU, has seen his rule as illegitimate. That he basically, because he lacked any political process for elections and for the 2018 or the 24 elections, so he was already deemed as someone who was not, and his rule was deemed as illegitimate by most international bodies. So he didn't have any street credibility internationally, aside from the fact of the oil, and that's really the big, for him, in terms of his rule, along with the drug issues, would let him have a seat at the table with all the other major players in the world, like Iran and China and Russia and so forth.
Who runs Venezuela right now? President Trump on Air Force One said that, he's running Venezuela now, or we are. Marco Rubio tried to walk that back a little bit. He says the president says a lot of stuff on Air Force One, and then people try to walk it back. Who is running Venezuela right now? They swore in the vice president. What power does she have?
Well, the Venezuelan Supreme Court swore in as interim vice president Delcy Rodriguez, who was a supporter and still, maintains her support for Maduro. And ironically, she's not the primary person. She's not the most popular person in Venezuela as far as being a potential leader. Many people wanted to see Maria Machado be the next leader. She is like a 70% popularity rating with the people, but Trump and his folks decided that they wanted to push for Delcy. And here's the thing that's interesting about this. Delcy initially was when this first happened, really came out very critical of the U.S. and the actions taken by the administration. She softened that as of yesterday. It doesn't mean that she doesn't think of it as being illegitimate what took place and that Maduro is not still legitimately the president. What it does mean, though, is that she has either quietly been told, get in line, or you're not going to be the next person. In fact, Trump said to her, basically that, hey, if you don't get in line, then what happened to Maduro will be worse for you. So I think she decided that it was prudent for her in order to try to maintain some stability in her country to take the actions that she did in order to somehow maintain a level of stability, which is still problematic in that country.
Rick,
It's going to be really ugly for a while.
It will be. I want to talk a little bit about the people and the reaction that we're seeing around the world. On one hand, there's so many videos we're seeing of so many Venezuelans all around the world celebrating this change. Yeah. But at the same time, we're seeing protests. We're seeing the UN calling an emergency meeting against what happened. How do you explain these mixed reactions?
Well, it's unfortunate, because on one hand, as as we talked about politics a lot and what we do, there are people who, will look at, and there's a lot of misinformation, let's say, because people are responding emotionally rather than rationally. A lot of people don't understand the context of international law, foreign policy, domestic policy. So they're basing it on emotion. If you think about it in terms of, the reactions are split because, again, of those various issues, and even the right to sovereignty, national sovereignty and national identity. And yes, you can say that the issue with corruption and narcotics and those things are really problematic. And so they see it as potential risk for regional instability. The international bodies are critical because of those issues. They also see it as potentially overreach for those who are naysayers. They say, wait a minute, the president and the administration went too far, and it is potentially illegal. It's politically risky. And unfortunately, to be quite frank, the United States has a great history of taking regimes apart that are corrupt. The problem is we really are not very, very good at rebuilding them. And we've had a long history of killing regimes and then have left chaos in their wake. And I can go back to Iraq. I can talk about Afghanistan. I can talk about Libya. Everywhere we've gone and tried this, we really have left nothing, because the reality is you can't take and say, hey, we're going to create democracy in a country that doesn't know democracy and going to, here, let's make it happen and think it's going to work. It doesn't work like that. Democracy takes time, it takes dedication, and it allows for those people to create democracy in a way they're going to understand it if they can get there at all. So I think it's partially because the people domestically inside of Venezuela, there are those who are loyalists to him because they don't really understand and believe, or maybe they were benefiting from what was taking place. But the majority of people there are happy to see him go. So the question is now, with Trump saying that we're now in control, that's a frightening notion. And I will say that candidly, because we're not good at this. And the fact of trying to think we're going to run it and run that country, which, if you look at the UN Charter and you look at what the Secretary General of the UN said, it violates all the principles within the UN Charter of right to sovereignty. And let's be honest, we have other countries south of the border too who fit quite nicely into that same paradigm as Venezuela,
right,
who nobody's bothering. And so, countries are worried. They're worried about with the U.S. taking this kind of action. Could they be next? And that's a very uncomfortable place, I would think, for us as a country to reside, to be this kind of global power that's using a very heavy hand to take action. I think it's a very slippery slope to be on, and I think it's very dangerous for foreign policy and our domestic and our global standing in the world. People are very afraid of us right now, and it's unfortunate.
I tell you what, this is a much bigger conversation. We'll be speaking again. Professor, political analyst Rick Epps, we thank you for the time and the expertise as always.